Welcome to part 6 of Tutomania, where I tell you about the boy King Tut and his life in celebration of 100 years since we discovered his tomb. Now we've gotten to the very end of his life story, so let's talk about how he might have died. First off, these theories have changed drastically in the past 100 years. They weren't even sure how old King Tut was when he died until they opened his sarcophagus. There was actually a song in the 1920s called Good Old King Tut, thinking that he died as an old man. I forgot to show the full reconstruction in the last video, so here it is. To note, the ancient Egyptians didn't actually leave any record about the circumstances of King Tut's death, which is pretty typical. We don't have any specific knowledge of how a lot of other pharaohs died. One of the earliest theories is that he was murdered, and that was a result of a 1968 X-ray of the mummy, which showed 2 bone fragments inside his skull. Here is an old X-ray of his skull pointing out some of the abnormalities. This was actually disproved by further X-rays and then the CT scan in 2005. It was determined that these loose bone fragments were actually dislodged during the unwrapping of the mummy and had not originally been stuck to the embalming resin that was on the outside of the skull. There was also no thinning or calcified membranes, which would have indicated that there was a blow to the head. A chariot accident was the next theory, and that was made because there were multiple quote-unquote crushing injuries to his body, including a missing rib and missing part of his chest wall. Trigger warning for images of Tutankhamen's mummy. So it turns out that this might be a post-mortem unwrapping accident, as I will quote, because original photos from when the mummy was first unwrapped, as you see here, his chest wall is perfectly intact. Remember that video I posted about the broad collar of King Tutankhamun and how it was missing from the tomb? Do you see it? It's still there? Yeah. It seems like whoever wanted to take the remnants of the broad collar ripped off part of his chest. The current accepted theory is that he died from a combination of the weakening conditions he had and the possible malaria infection. We do know that very close to his death, he had a very severe break on his left leg. Some scholars thought this was happened during the mummification process or during the unwrapping process, but we were able to determine that this most likely happened right before his death, because the break was actually ragged on the edges rather than sharp, which would have indicated a more modern break. There was also no healing on the bone, and there was actually embalming liquid inside the fracture point. Tut was about 14 to 18 years old, depending on his date of birth, and he died around 1327 BCE, possibly from an infection that he got after he fell or had an accident of some kind. So what happens after the death of a pharaoh? Did you think it would be that the queen would write a letter to the Hittite Empire asking for a husband?